Also, you'll find good old-fashioned cut and pasted, someone with an X-Acto knife out in a early primitive darkroom slapping together photos that actually don't belong together to begin with.
This technology of its day was a sure way to make multiple images and combine them into one. There was no way the rewriters wouldn't need this for faking construction pictures. And no, it's not Photoshop, but the layering process is very similar. Victorian photography manipulation, using pencil markings and scraping techniques to draw, erase, and touch up any image desired. The easiest way to achieve your goals is to have a white background that you can remove later in the darkroom. Not uncommon for others to create trick photography and show off their masking and etching skills. For back then, this was the cutting edge of the start of this fraudulent society they've built.
They take an already completed building and they whitewash the skies. They call it vanilla skies.
They'll blotch out the sky and cut away from what they want to leave in the photo. They can cut away what was there and replace it with a gray or white vanilla colored sky.
Vanilla sky, where the background is cut out and you can see the crop marks, you can zoom in and see where the edge of the building there's a little bit of a blurry edge. The sky that would have been the background has been disappeared. It's like, well, why would they do that? If you see one construction photo that's off, where they've painted in scaffolding, or they've taken out backgrounds, you have to stop. Why did they go to the extent to do this? You have to ask the question. And if you see hundreds of photos that are done this way, you have to realize this was an industrial scale effort to create a narrative. Exquisite masonry buildings were built in 1 or 2 years. These take time. I mean, you put 1 or 2 years just into the planning. Well, before that, you have the engineering piece, you have the design. You're not just getting a bunch of artists and builders together and knocking these things out. There's architects involved, so there's the design. Then there's the engineering of it. All of this takes time. These buildings are years in the making. And especially when you're crafting every single corner of it, like what we're seeing every doorknob, every cornice over a window is celebrated. And this is why the architecture is so beautiful. It's an architecture of celebration.
You have to ask yourself this: why is there such a lack of construction photos from the inside of the buildings? The outside's incredible, but the inside is built like a palace. There's such a lack of photos from the inside of these buildings, and they're incredible. When you had the Kleksinski building in Chicago that took 14 years, and then you come back and you look at the one before that, the Federal building, built in 7 years. How is that possible? They're not gonna be able to bring these things all the way up to the top, get these people that have no training, and actually create this amazing thing that lasts forever. In a timeline where they tell you they were riding around on horses and wagons, where this should not be accepted. It's just not gonna happen in the amount of time that they're telling us.
We know people cook the books in other areas. We know people have manipulated photos for the sake of deceiving people, just like NASA does. This isn't a new thing. It's an old thing, but it's still being done today. You find photo manipulation. Now, CGI, the techniques have developed substantially. But back then, they thought they were at the cutting edge. They didn't think that they would be caught onto.
Or maybe they didn't care. Like, by the time they figure this shit out, who cares? We'll be long gone, and who cares?
They have their stories. Everything has something to explain it within the last 100 to 200 years.
I even called the Illinois State Archives building, and they didn't have information on their own courthouse that's located within 1 mile of itself.
Illinois State Archives, how may I help you?
Hey, I was just transferred to you because I was looking at the Supreme Court when it was built, and I was just trying to find like records on it, and it said it was saying like on their website it was saying that it was built in like a year. So I was just trying to figure out if that was true or not.
I would have you tried contacting the Supreme Court?
Yeah, and they sent me over to you guys.
Okay. I don't know what we would have on the building itself. Let me look here.
Yeah, it was saying on their website that the keys were given over on February 4th, 1908, but 1908 they also said that they were moving out of the old state capitol building, so I don't know, 2 months, it doesn't sound right.
Yeah, that sounds kind of odd. Let's see here. I don't know if we have anything on the building itself.
The stories that we've been told are basically just that. They're stories that we're repeating over and over, and we're just regurgitating what they've been telling us. You could either choose to believe it, or you could choose to research and see the truth, that these are buildings from the past civilization.
I'm standing in front of the sunken ship parking garage, which is in the exact spot as the Occidental building. Now, the Occidental building was built supposedly in 1882 and was destroyed in the Great Fire. That was a giant masonry, massive 3-4 thick wall of just solid brick and stone that was somehow burned down in a fire. So this is what the modern era rolled out for us. We have the sunken ship parking garage, which is just kind of a thumb in the nose of this world that we're living in now. Yeah, salt in the wound, but I think it's just good that we remember the past and know what used to be there and the glory of the old world as it was.
On a lot of these old glorious structures, you'll start seeing old cheap banners, signs just kind of get slapped on to these old glorious stone buildings. They simply don't fit together.
These buildings were not intended to become money-driven establishments, and those they kept turned into such. It's funny that we never hear through the passing down of generations stories regarding any of the difficulties a nation would face building a magnitude of stone and brick palaces.
Why are none of our grandparents or great-grandparents ever speaking highly of these buildings? If they were truly built in the early 1900s, do you think one of our grandparents would have been like, yeah, I was at the site and I'm so proud of building that? Or my friend, I knew somebody and he was over there building that building? Not one time. Does that sound odd? In order to build some of these buildings in a year, you'd have to have hundreds of people, like daily, sleeping there. You'd have to have people with houses located on site because they got their horse and their wagon. Are they traveling home at night? Where are these horses staying during the day when they're building these buildings? And it's just, the story doesn't add up. If it was really truly built, like they say, then there would be so much proof. And sorry, but saying that a photo wasn't available or hard to take back then, that's not gonna cut it. You've taken a photo before. Why couldn't you take another one? They transported all these materials from hundreds of miles away, and it got there perfectly. There was never an issue. It just isn't logically possible.
As an architect of 20 years, I have a pretty good understanding of how materials react to the elements over time. Modern infrastructure of Seattle is at best 140 years old. There's no room in that narrative for a building to be showing the type of weathering that we're seeing beyond. So just to me, that one building alone is further evidence that this city was here for a long time. To me, it's been there for centuries. I would give this building 300 years. I like to look at a building as telling its own story. I'd like to say that stones don't lie. Stones are always going to tell you the truth. And if you look at it through that lens and you let it tell its own story, then something else emerges entirely.